So welcome to our next episode. Let's talk about envelopes, but before we do so, I just wanna compare it briefly, with these other two, because I want you to understand the whole concept of this better. Because envelopes, LFOs, and functions, they all have one in common. They add motion or movement to things. And the question for you is when to use which of those when you make decisions. And of course, it's somehow limited to their capabilities. You can do things with LFOs that you can do with envelopes and vice versa. But the concept of envelopes is that everything has a starting point, a peak position, so the highest position it can reach, and then it travels back to default. So it's a journey from a starting point to the highest point and then back to default. LFOs, however, they are in constant motion. Of course, they will at some point in time be at their first position again, but then they keep moving. They don't have this progression, and they always repeat the same shape. And then functions, the special thing about functions is, as I told you earlier, that you can do something like this. So you're not limited to either have the same progression, and not only just once, because you can set it on loop, and you're not limited to have the looping same stuff all the time. I mean, if you hit loop here, of course, it will always repeat what you see here, but you can't make this shape in an LFO or an envelope because this is completely free drawn right now. So just that you get the idea about these concepts of these three, we will cover this in the next lessons, the other ones. But just that you have it already in mind now when we apply envelopes, we want to look for things that we can manipulate in a way that they have a peak position and then go back to default. So where does that make sense? We could, for instance, now just take our envelope 2, and I mean, listen to the patch first. It's from the sound set. This is how it sounds like. What it sounds like. So quite a little bit of resonance. So you could, for instance, bring this down. So it sounds like this. So it's more powerful in the core sound, because these high frequencies, they are not making the sound so thin. But then we could take our envelope and let it do this for us a little bit, so that we only have this resonance at the very attack. I mean, look how short it is at this peak position, right? And we instantly back at default. So if I hold down notes, that's quite a difference to if we bring this up to this position already. And don't mind this gray line, I deactivated the filter. So this is our default position now. Like when we had this activated, it would jump for us to this point and go back, but now it's always on this level. Now listen to compare. So it sounds way harsher and we have way more distortion. And it's fine, if you want this on your patch, then this would be the perfect setting. But this is just a good example of how you can make use of envelopes. So if you bring this down and say, hey, I only want this resonance at the very beginning for the blink of an eye for 1 second or a half second, then this is perfect. And the core sound stays cleaner. And then you could, of course, add this to something like fine tune, so that each note starts with a little bit of instability and goes back. Of course, you can bring this to the maximum or something around, and you have stronger effects. this is already a little bit too strong because it messes with our scale. You can't really hear the melody anymore. But you get the idea, right? So this is something where you could apply it. It's okay, I just want a little pitch shift in the beginning. The difference here to the drift button is the drift button adds this instability constantly to each note you play. So each note will be different in their fine tune as long as you hold it down. But with the envelope, it will just be for this tiny second before it goes back to default. This is the concept that I told you about. Like if you did this with an LFO as we did in previous lessons, the fine tune would move all the time back and forth. But with the envelope, we only have it for the attack time. And another thing that you could add this, of course, is something like the shape of an envelope. You can say, oh, I wanna, oops, this is envelope 3. I want just to have this shape for each initial note. So this apparently makes no difference now. At least not really audible. But sometimes it does. Depends on the patch, how much impact a waveform has. So you just have the idea. You could do the same with the modulation. You could say I just want to have modulation at the very beginning. In this case, I don't really think it sounds good because it somehow cracks up the sound at the attack. There's this, and then, you know, like it kills the attack transient a little bit. But this is something you could get rid of, right? You could then mess with the attack time, make it shorter so it instantly starts higher, and has not this time where it goes up and you hear this diving in. But therefore you would then, let's actually do this to show you. Let's actually take envelope 3 for this purpose. And then make this super short. It should be a little bit better, let's see. Yeah, so now the attack is more stable because we don't hear this part. You know, this part of going in, at least at the settings we had before, did a little bit mess with the sound. If you have it this strong, it's again good. If you want that, of course. Whoops. Which one this? Yeah, okay. But yeah, or you go just for this and then, of course, can bring this up a little bit. So we start with a little bit of this already and then have just a little impact. Or just bring it down and have it subtle. This is why is this going so... I think this is still... It's still modulating, yeah, I was wondering. Because it went way higher than I clicked, so... I have now closed just the filter with my mod wheel. So you hear it more here. So with the filter closed, this effect is just stronger audible than here. Because this is a really bright patch and you are adding brightness, so it's like holding your lamp into the sunlight, right? It's maybe a little bit visible, but not that much. But if you make it all dark and then bring in some light, in this case some higher frequencies, you will hear this effect stronger. So yeah, this is one way to use envelopes, and I just want to show you another thing. Let's just for fun add a bit crusher at the end of our chain here, and bring envelope 2, 3 into this, and let's make it some progress in here, and then with a pretty nice effect now, because this is an extreme setting now, right? It's long, it's set to 3 seconds, almost 4, so you can hear it, but this is pretty cool. And of course you could set this to lower settings, but then it's not that cool anymore. Then it's just like water. Sounds a little bit like water, but you get the idea, right? So we set our end positions where it should start, and then it takes all the way back. Of course we can increase the attack as well, so we have going all the way there and then back. I just went with this for ease of use. But this is the concept of an envelope. You have a journey, you have a start and you have an ending and a peak position. Just keep that in mind when you use them, and then you will find a lot of opportunities to apply them. And I will see you in the next lessons when we will be talking about LFOs.